Maha Qureshi always believed she understood her faith and what awaited us after we leave this world. That was until an unforeseen event changed everything. Now she's here to share her remarkable near-death encounter, which altered her perceptions of spirituality and the afterlife fundamentally. Let me introduce myself. I'm Maha. I'm 47 years old and I live in a modest 2-story home in Ann Arbor, Michigan. This has been my family's base for most of my adult life. Before that fateful day, I was living pretty much like any other middle-aged mom, juggling my role as a pharmacy technician at a local pharmacy while taking care of my 2 teenagers and supporting my husband Omar. Faith was always a cornerstone of my life. Coming from a dedicated Muslim background, I engaged fully in my beliefs. Daily prayers, the observance of Ramadan, and living out the values my parents, who emigrated from Bangladesh, instilled in me were central to my routine. They worked hard to ensure that, even in America, we maintained our traditions and religious practices. It was another busy winter morning, and I was bustling in the kitchen, getting breakfast ready for the kids before they headed off to school. The news droned on in the background, discussing an upcoming snowstorm, which reminded me to make a grocery run after my shift. Little did I know that our carbon monoxide detector had been malfunctioning for weeks, something both Omar and I had overlooked in our last round of home maintenance. Unbeknownst to us, our aging furnace had developed a crack in the heat exchanger, leading to the stealthy escape of that invisible, odorless gas throughout our home. I remember feeling a bit off, like I was wobbling on the spot and slightly dizzy while I finished preparing lunches. My daughter, Sana, had been complaining of a headache and chose to stay home from school, while my son Ibrahim was upstairs, showering. As my dizziness grew more pronounced while I was loading the dishwasher, things got really hazy. I attempted to reach for my phone to call for help, but my fingers felt numb and sluggish. The last thing I recall was the alarmed look on Sana's face just before I crumpled to the kitchen floor. Later, I learned that, despite feeling unwell herself, Sana had the presence of mind to call for assistance. Imagine a quiet morning turned chaotic when emergency responders rushed in, detecting alarming levels of carbon monoxide permeating our home. They managed to get us out just before things could have taken a dire turn. I was unconscious. Lena could barely hold herself upright, and Hamza was there too, feeling the weight of the situation. Suddenly, I found myself in the shower, unaware that my life was about to pivot. Later, the paramedics shared some shocking news. My heart had ceased to beat for nearly 4 minutes and 37 seconds while we sped to the hospital. For those fleeting moments, I was clinically dead. But what I experienced during that time felt like a lifetime, altering everything I had thought I knew about existence and the afterlife. Looking back on it all, I see how my life had been leading me to that moment of truth. Years of fervent prayers and unwavering beliefs about the afterlife had shaped my understanding, yet none prepared me for what was to come. The doctor was amazed at my fortune. If Lena had delayed that call, if the responders had arrived even a few moments later, or if the carbon monoxide levels had risen just a notch, the outcome could have been catastrophic. But now, it feels less like mere chance and more like a divine intervention, offering insights I had never contemplated. In the past, I gauged my life based on compliance with certain standards. Did I pray at the right times? Was my attire modest enough? Was I displaying how a good Muslim woman should live for my children to see? These thoughts were a constant presence, influencing my daily decisions. My relationship with Omar was rooted in these shared beliefs. We had first met at the Islamic Center during a community event, both from families that valued marrying within our faith. Raising our kids with these principles, we signed them up for weekend Islamic classes to help them truly grasp our beliefs. Working at CVS sometimes tested my faith. I encountered prescriptions that conflicted with Islamic teachings and customers whose choices starkly contrasted my values. Yet, I often reminded myself that it wasn't my place to judge. Only Allah has that authority. That morning, as I reflected on everything, there was a keen sense of gratitude permeating my thoughts. Imagine a chilly morning in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where the sun peeked through clouds onto my kitchen window. I watched the neighbors' children bundle up in their winter gear, eagerly anticipating the arrival of their school bus. It felt like a perfect day, and it seemed as if everything was falling into place. Omar had just earned a full scholarship to the university, and Ibrahim, after a rocky start to his high school journey, was finally pulling up his grades. Rafiq had received a promotion at work, and our family was embracing the beauty of living a mindful life. As I sipped my coffee, I noticed Mrs. Bennett outside, clearing snow from her driveway. I considered suggesting to Hamza that he help her out later. Those little moments were soothing, grounding me in my routine, but I had no idea that the serenity I felt would soon give way to a life-altering experience. Just a few hours later, the foundation of my entire belief system was about to tremble like a tower of cards in a fierce wind. They say near-death experiences can change a person, but my experience was something else entirely. It was as though I was born anew, seeing everything around me through an entirely different lens. During those astounding 4 minutes and 37 seconds, I was given insights that would ripple through my life and everyone connected to me. That morning, I had no idea that by nightfall, I would be carrying a crucial message, one that would inspire me to share it with anyone willing to listen. It was about what comes after this life, the true essence of God, and how every choice we make holds weight in our existence. When my heart finally stopped beating, everything shifted. There was no glowing tunnel, no welcoming light. Instead, I felt as if I plunged into frigid water, a shocking chill that enveloped me. From above, I floated, watching paramedics work frantically in the ambulance. Their voices were muffled, as if they were communicating from another realm. One rushed to perform chest compressions while another prepared the defibrillator. Glancing down, I saw my lifeless body, pale in my blue uniform from CVS. The silver necklace from Lena lingered around my neck, a subtle reminder of the connections I'd forged in life. Imagine being in a surreal moment where fear seems entirely absent. Instead of feeling scared, it was like I was merely watching a play unfold, observing every small detail around me. Like the young paramedic with a coffee stain on his sleeve or the ceiling of the ambulance, which had a crack that oddly resembled a question mark. Then, without warning, everything turned black, but not in the usual way. This wasn't the empty darkness that greets you when you close your eyes. It was dense, almost sentient, wrapping around me like a thick fog. A pull from somewhere unknown drew me deeper into this void, and suddenly, I became aware that I was not alone. A presence entered with me, striking a balance between beauty and terror. Although I couldn't see it in a conventional way, I felt the presence of something akin to an angel. This isn't the kind of figure you'd see on holiday cards, all soft and serene. No, this was primal and fierce, a force that made my very essence tremble in its wake. The communication wasn't verbal. Instead, it erupted within me. A torrent of images and insights rushed in. In that moment, my life played out in vivid detail, not just the obvious moments, but the subtle ripples my actions created. I remembered a time I had brushed off a coworker, realizing just how that simple act had dampened her spirits. And then there was the memory of helping an elderly woman with her medications, a small kindness that, unbeknownst to me, had rekindled her hope at a time of desperation. But the most profound realization struck me when I reflected on how my commitment to Islam influenced those around me. I saw how my encouragement for friends to embrace stricter practices, which I thought was for their benefit, had actually distanced some from the truth. Instinctively, I wanted to defend my views. Yet, in the overwhelming presence of such a powerful entity, my need to argue fell away. Next, the angel revealed scenes from history that felt distant and unfamiliar. Hidden truths about our Prophet Muhammad came into focus, as if a veil had been lifted, altering my perception dramatically. As the shadows began to shift, I noticed countless souls drifting through this darkness. Some were reaching towards a light I hadn't realized was there, while others were sinking further into the gloom, their spirits flickering dimmer. The angel conveyed that the fate of each soul wasn't just chance. It was the direct outcome of the beliefs they held and the actions they took. Imagine witnessing a diverse gathering of individuals, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, and a variety of other seekers, all in pursuit of truth, only to find themselves lost along the way. Some of these earnest souls realized their missteps too late, calling out for help from Allah or their prophets, but their pleas vanished into silence. Through this experience, I started to grasp the idea that there exists one true path leading toward enlightenment, a singular truth that could lift a soul from darkness. As I moved closer to those in despair, an angel guided me, and I could almost touch the fear and anguish surrounding them. It felt heavy, pressing down on me. Among them, I recognized faces of kind-hearted individuals, praying 5 times daily and contributing generously to the community. Yet, they too were being dragged into hopelessness. Their prayers reverberated in a void, unanswered. Reflecting on our mosque's atmosphere, I noticed Rafiq, who had led prayers for years with such vigor. In that moment, he seemed diminished, his prayer beads clutched tightly in his hands. Nearby, Lena stood with a hint of sorrow, her eyes revealing the weight of her dedication to teaching our children about the Quran. We all felt the unsettling truth that somehow we had seriously misaligned our faith. Then, an angel graced my vision, revealing heartbreaking scenes that pierced my very soul. I witnessed children, including some from my community, ascending joyfully toward a brilliant light. Unlike the adults, these young ones were still pure and untainted by misguided notions. This sight brought a bittersweet solace, reminding me of the many parents who would never again have the chance to embrace their little ones. As we continued through this celestial space, I observed something striking. Certain souls were bound by glowing chains, surprisingly not made of metal, but forged from their beliefs and cultural practices. These chains were weighty, and I realized that mine were also visible, adorned with beautiful Arabic script and Islamic motifs. While they held a certain elegance, the burden was palpable. In the background, I caught sight of an expansive courtroom, gleaming and pristine, where souls stood before a radiant yet inscrutable judge. Each life was examined, not only by the actions taken, but also by the choices made regarding their beliefs. I watched as a familiar woman from our mosque approached the light, visibly struggling with the recognition of her past interactions with Christian missionaries playing out before her. Every time Maha Qureshi had come across a church or listened to the gospel and then turned away, it became another notch against her. Then came my moment. All those times I had proudly proclaimed my beliefs, insisting that Jesus was just a prophet and dismissing the Bible as something corrupted replayed in my mind. The weight of that realization felt heavy on my chest. Unlike many others I had encountered, my fate was not sealed. The angel beside me made it clear that this wasn't a condemnation, but rather a lesson meant for a purpose. I was granted a chance to return and share what I had learned, but I needed to witness even more first. As we started to move toward the light above, I felt my chains, each false belief, beginning to loosen as we ascended. The light wasn't hard to bear. It wrapped around me like a warm hug, bringing an incredible sense of clarity to my being. My journey led me through a series of breathtaking realms, each more mesmerizing than the last. An angel walking alongside me pointed out something crucial. These were not the various heavens I had been taught about in my Islamic education. Suddenly, there I was, standing before Jesus Christ. This moment was different. It wasn't the familiar figure I had known, the prophet, the good man. No, it was the essence of God, surrounded by a love so overwhelming that it felt as if it could shatter me into 1,000 pieces. All the misconceptions I had held about him blew away like leaves in a strong autumn wind. I began to understand the concept of the Trinity, which I had always viewed through a distorted perspective. It wasn't 3 separate gods as I had been taught. Rather, it was one God revealed in 3 divine persons. Imagine trying to explain color to someone who's only ever seen shades of gray. It's simply incomprehensible until you experience it for yourself. The angel then revealed moments from true history that sharply contrasted with my previous beliefs. I witnessed the crucifixion of Jesus, something I had been led to think was a myth, and then came his resurrection. I saw the birth of the early Christian church and how its message spread across the lands. Yet what resonated the most was the unsettling portrayal of how various faiths, including Islam, had distorted these truths throughout time. I found myself facing a challenging reality regarding the roots of Islamic teachings. Imagine discovering insights that completely challenge everything you once held dear. An angel unveiled truths about how human aspirations and the complex nature of power have heavily shaped my faith, faith I had once embraced wholeheartedly. The real Muhammad, it turned out, was nothing like the perfect figure I had idealized. But this wasn't a critique of Muslims. It aimed to explain why so many sincere individuals had been misled over time. The sheer scale of deception was staggering. It became clear that those intent on misleading others had skillfully manipulated this lie across generations, capitalizing on people's inherent desire for structure and certainty. Instead of a library brimming with traditional books, I stumbled upon a vast collection of lives, rich narratives showcasing choices made and chances missed. As I wandered through this realm, I caught glimpses of forks in the road I might have taken had I recognized the truth sooner. I imagined a future where my kids grew up liberated from the burdens of misguided beliefs. Partnering with my husband, we would guide others toward true freedom, helping them escape the snags of misunderstanding. But then it struck me. Everything took a heavy turn. I was confronted with the faces of those I had influenced, friends I had pushed to delve deeper into Islam, neighbors I had invited to the mosque, and even my own kids, whom I had led to disregard Christian teachings. The angel made it clear. My responsibility extended beyond my own actions. I would account for how my choices had affected those around me. Yet even amid this weighty revelation, a flicker of hope arose. My near-death experience held the potential to transform lives. I imagined sharing my testimony, a beacon guiding others away from the chains that once bound me. I could see Muslims begin to ponder their own beliefs as they heard my story, igniting their search for authenticity. In a dramatic shift, I found myself in a breathtaking throne room, a truly divine sight. The presence of God surrounded me, so profound that my past notions of worship seemed trivial. This was no distant being I had addressed in prayers. I stood before a loving Father who understood me completely. In that hallowed space, I found my entire understanding of salvation transformed. Imagine witnessing a moment that felt like a glimpse into heaven, where people entered not solely due to their good deeds or self-importance, but because of their genuine faith in Jesus Christ. Their lives shone with this faith, displayed through sacraments and inspired by the Holy Spirit. It finally dawned on me that salvation is truly a gracious gift, one that you receive through faith, affirmed by sacraments and shown through your actions. Then there was this eye-opening realization. The religious devotion I thought would secure my salvation, everything I held onto so tightly, turned out to be my own stumbling block. My strict adherence to Islamic law, with all those rituals, prayers, and fasting, those weren't the paths to God. Instead, they were misdirected efforts to earn something that could only be given freely through faith in Jesus Christ and his sacrifice. I found myself in a surreal conversation in heaven. Souls could be seen meeting Jesus for the first time, hailing from all walks of life, Muslims like I once was, as well as Hindus, Buddhists, and even atheists. What really resonated with me was their shared disbelief. Many expressed sentiments like, "But I was so convinced I was right." The overwhelming love washing over them was nothing short of miraculous, but, tragically, for some, it had come too late. Next, the angel guided me to an unexpected sight, the saints from Christian history. They weren't distant figures filled with awe. Rather, they were vibrant, humble beings bursting with life. I observed them worshiping alongside former Muslims who had unwrapped the truth while on earth. In that moment, there was no hint of hierarchy, no rankings, just a unified celebration of God's grace flowing among them. But then came the most difficult vision I experienced. I was led to behold hell, not just as a metaphorical separation from God, but as an agonizing reality. Flames flickered around, representing the intense suffering of eternal separation. The souls I encountered in their despair weren't being tormented by devils. Their anguish stemmed from the crushing absence of God's presence. The flames weren't merely a source of heat. They symbolized the endless torment that engulfed them. These lost souls included esteemed religious leaders, both men and women, who misled countless followers during their lifetimes. Their suffering was compounded by the realization of their actions, as they understood that each soul led astray by their flawed teachings only added to their own despair. Amid the struggles and heartache, there was something profound in knowing their experiences were part of a greater plan. Then, I had a moment that left me utterly devastated. I saw countless Muslims deeply engaged in prayer, their sincere requests reverberating against what felt like an unyielding brass barrier. They weren't being disregarded by God, rather their earnestness was being misdirected. It dawned on me that the enemy had taken their genuine devotion and led them to find comfort in hollow traditions, diverting them from the true path of salvation through faith in Jesus Christ. Real connection with the divine unfolds through the sacraments and a life dedicated to good works stemming from authentic belief. Out of nowhere, a vision of my possible future emerged if I chose to return. It was daunting. I envisioned myself facing exclusion from my community, dealing with family turmoil, and bearing the weight of betrayal while wrestling with mental strife. Yet amid these trials, the potential to impact lives through my story flickered brightly in my mind. The angel gently reminded me that while this journey would be fraught with challenges, its significance echoed through eternity. What came next was beyond words. I found myself at a crossroads, to stay in heaven or to return and spread the insight I had gained. The serene beauty of heaven was intoxicating, and part of me yearned to linger there forever. But then, thoughts of those whose lives I could transform, especially my family's, compelled me to understand the obligation resting on my shoulders. Before my return, the angel bestowed upon me one final revelation. I observed my judgment day, not as a moment of reckoning, but through the perspective of someone who had completed their purpose on earth. Standing before Jesus, I didn't need to see him as a judge. He appeared to me as my Savior. I heard the affirmation, "Well done, good and faithful servant." That affirmation ignited a joy within me that far outweighed any temporary suffering awaiting my return. Suddenly, I was jolted back to my body, the experience akin to being shoved through a tight passage. I felt the oppressive pressure of CPR on my chest, and the intense glow of the hospital lights was blinding after the purity of true illumination. The first face I recognized was Omar's, tears cascading down his cheeks as he clutched my hand. Our little ones stood nearby with their eyes swollen and red from crying. The doctors commented on my incredible fortune, noting how rare it was for someone in my state to survive. It really is hard to fathom, but survivors of carbon monoxide poisoning are indeed uncommon. It struck me that what I had witnessed was no mere coincidence when they emerged from the hospital room. I felt an overwhelming need to tell my family about this experience, but Omar dismissed it as simply confusion due to oxygen deprivation. Sana and Ibrahim exchanged concerned looks, unsure of how to respond to my assertions. Returning home was anything but easy. The news traveled through our community like a wildfire, and people I had known for years suddenly began to distance themselves from me. Even Mrs. Bennett dropped by to suggest I consider seeking psychiatric help. My parents back in Bangladesh were devastated. I could hear the heartbreak in their voices as they begged me to take back what I had said. Omar was patient at first, convinced that it was just a passing phase I was going through, but everything shifted when I discovered a new spiritual path. I stopped visiting the mosque and began going to a nearby church instead. There, I found inspiration in acts of charity and participated in sacraments that touched my soul in ways I couldn't have anticipated. This change sparked conflict at home. Omar would find me immersed in the Bible or quietly praying the rosary, leading to heated discussions about how to explain my journey to the kids. Was I off my rocker? Yet something beautiful emerged. I soon realized I wasn't alone in my doubts. Others from our community started reaching out to me in private. One friend from the mosque confessed to secretly exploring church services and expressed curiosity about faith. To my surprise, my daughter Sana showed genuine interest in my experiences and listened intently to my stories. About 6 months after my awakening, I received an invitation to share my journey at a small church event. Though I was filled with anxiety, I felt compelled to go. Once I began to speak, it was as if a dam had burst. My words flowed freely, and many in the audience, including some familiar faces from the Muslim community, were visibly moved. By the time I finished, 3 people chose to accept Christ, embarking on a new path through baptism. Fast forward 2 years, and our home has become a hub for individuals from all walks of life seeking answers. Every week, people come with their questions, former Muslims, skeptics, and those who have also undergone profound transformations. While Omar hasn't fully embraced my beliefs, I sense a change in him. Just the other night, I caught him reading the Gospel of John, thinking I was asleep. The initial backlash has also faded. Although I still get the occasional harsh message online, they now feel insignificant. Imagine understanding eternity in a way that transforms your view of life's temporary struggles. Since 3 months ago, the joy I've discovered has been my most profound blessing. Recently, I had a conversation with Nita that left me in awe. She told me about her experience reading the Bible I gave her. It was as if she felt God's love wrapping around her, compelling her to pray to Jesus in silence. This moment lit a fire within her, motivating her to participate in sacraments and actively demonstrate her faith through acts of kindness. Meanwhile, there's also Hamza, who is on his own journey. He's still sorting things out, but it's heartening to see the thought-provoking questions he's asking. Every single evening, I offer thanks to God for this new opportunity in my life. It feels like I've been given a divine nudge to help others discover the truth. Reflecting on my past, I realize my journey might seem incredible to some. Just 2 years back, I would have likely dismissed such ideas without a second thought. But what I've experienced is undeniable, and it drives me to speak up. There are so many people, like I once was, who are actively searching for truth, and I can't remain silent any longer. If my story can guide even one person toward their path, then all I've endured will have been worthwhile. If what you heard today resonated with you, a thumbs up and a subscription to our channel would mean the world to us. And don't forget to hit that notification bell to stay updated with powerful testimonies of God's love. Sharing this message could touch someone else's life, because you never really know how much impact a single story can have.